Welcome back to the Metal Exchange, or should I say the Alternative Exchange. Chris, how are you?
I'm just glad that you had the time to listen to me whine.
Yeah, I knew we would get to it eventually. No better time than the present. I know it was a little bit of a curveball coming off the Sabaton episode last week, but I am very excited to talk about some Green Day this week. They are a not so guilty pleasure of mine, and I know it's the same for you. And sometimes we I think keep things fresh and to just kind of move things away from the typical metal show. I think it's interesting when we can kind of put our perspective on albums that are a little bit outside the typical metal wheelhouse, and this would obviously be no exception.
Absolutely. I have a lot to say. This album was a very important part of my formidable music listening. I mean, I was just at that age where I was just ingesting whatever MTV and the radio was feeding me, and in 1994 it was alt rock. I mean, that was the music of the day. That's it's this era of alt rock, I think, is kind of the natural follow up to the grunge movement, which a lot of people would say killed metal, or at least killed mainstream metal in the United States. So I understand that there are like people that feel divisive about this kind of genre of music because it kind of represents the murder of their genre. But for me, this was kind of my first taste of getting really into like mainstream rock music. So for me, and I know you're only a couple of months younger than I am, like I'm sure it was the same for you.
Totally, and I'm looking forward to getting into it. I'm just going to say a couple of things before we start, which is there were a couple of albums that came out within the last week or two that really just, if you haven't heard, are definitely worthy of consideration. The new Halo Effect album came out. It's fantastic. I know it's gotten a lot of good hype with good reason. I think that it's going to be up there in terms of on a lot of album of the year lists. The new Seventh Storm album, which we talked about briefly when one of the singles came out, it's quite good. I don't know that it's going to necessarily be on my top 50, but it's close, or I think it'll probably wind up being close. Quite good. And quite frankly, the real, I don't want to say surprise, but God, the new Arch Enemy album is fantastic. Deceivers. I think I've listened to it, maybe 4 or 5 times already, and it's just getting better with each listen. The production is outstanding. The songwriting is very good. And there's something about that combination between Jeff Loomis's guitar and Alicia's vocals. They're onto something big, and I have a feeling. I mean, they've blown up already, but they're destined for like superstardom with this release, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it in past episodes, but I'm looking forward to hearing it. I have it. I just haven't listened to it yet. I managed to go from being completely caught up to being like 5 or 6 albums behind again. So that's on my list amongst a handful of others. Halo Effect being another one. And also the newest album from Ronnie and Eclipse's what's his name? I always forget his name.
Eric.
Yeah, Eric and Ronnie.
Eric and Ronnie are two buds. Nordic Union.
Yeah, that's another one that I'm really excited about digging into. So
nice.
Yeah, I'm sure. Just give me one busy work day, I'll be all caught up.
Beautiful. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. But let's go back to 1994. Green Day's Dookie comes out February 1st of that year, and in many ways, I think 1994, just in general, was a real interesting year and very formative year, not just for us, but for many things. I feel like 94 was just a big year in terms of stuff happening. I know we covered Euthanasia a few weeks ago, and obviously that came out in 94. This, obviously a lot more mainstream and getting radio play and all that. It was really a sign of the times. But when you think about like killing metal, the metal that was really on the radio and that was like of super popularity was a special niche type of metal, right? Like, in other words, you weren't hearing bands like Testament on the radio or bands like Slayer on the radio. You were hearing the hair bands, as we affectionately call them. So when they say it killed mainstream metal, yeah, maybe the popularity for the genre began to wane quite a bit. You weren't seeing Headbangers Ball as much on TV, and you weren't seeing these high production stadium tours. But at the same time, the music was still being made, and we go back to albums from the mid-'90s all the time. There was great stuff being made, just mostly in Europe.
Yeah, and I just don't think that people were, as far as people that are listening to just what the mainstream is feeding them, like, I mean, this, like I said, I remember, Z100 was our top 40 radio station growing up. As far as I know, it still is if you live on Long Island or in New York City. And you turned it on in 1993, 1994, and you were hearing, Stone Temple Pilots and Pearl Jam and Red Hot Chili Peppers. And that was what was mainstream rock in the U.S., and it was awesome. I mean, going back to when we talked about the Monkees, like that was my knowledge of music was like the Monkees from my cousin, and then just the classic rock that my mom would listen to on the radio, and the oldies that my dad would listen to, and Frank Sinatra. When my dad and my uncle would get together, would be listening to that kind of stuff. But as far as like modern music, I was just never really aware of it, and it was probably, it's kind of funny. I don't remember if I'm sure I told the story in our Pearl Jam episode, but I'll tell it again. Very similarly to the storied tale of Ralph making me a mixtape with all these metal songs on it in 1997. I had another friend when I was in 6th grade who made me a mixtape in 1994, and it was like one side of the tape was like songs from CDs that he owned, and the back end of the tape was stuff that he recorded right off of FM radio, probably mostly from Z100. And I remember like Because the Night by 10,000 Maniacs from their MTV Unplugged performance, and just like random songs like that. But I remember on the first side of the tape, the first 4 songs were Mr. Jones and Round Here by Counting Crows, and Daughter and Elderly Woman Behind the Counter of a Small Town by Pearl Jam. And I just remember like thinking to myself, like, man, I love this type of music. And so I just started that summer. So this was, again, and this is right around the time of my birthday, oddly enough. I just asked for mixtapes of music I'm not aware of as birthday gifts, apparently. I go into summer vacation, and all I did for summer vacation was just watch MTV, just watch. And this is MTV in 1994. This is music videos most of the day. And if there was a show on MTV that wasn't a music video, it was either The Real World or Beavis and Butthead. And that was maybe Remote Control, if you remember that game show from back then. But MTV didn't really have a lot of non-music video programming at this time. So I was obsessed with the weekly top 20 countdown, like watching it every Friday night to see like if my favorite band had moved up to number 1, and just obsessed. And through that, I found myself listening to the radio constantly, and at the same time also listening to a lot of classic rock on the radio, and just really just ingesting as much rock music as possible. And so during this time, the MTV had a thing called the Buzz Bin, and it was when a band that you'd never heard of has a music video, and they just throw it out there, and it's kind of like a sink or swim kind of situation. I remember the Sweater Song by Weezer was one of those, and it was like you didn't know if this was just a one-off and you'd never see this band again, or maybe they'll blow up. And in Weezer's case, once the next video came out, which was Buddy Holly, which was I thought one of the most well-made music videos of its time. Shout-outs to director Spike Jonze. Dude directed so many great music videos around this time. Green Day was one of those bands that was the Buzzbin, and it was the song Longview, and it was that music video of Billy Joe just sitting in his house and sitting on the couch and pretty much told the story of the song. And I'm pretty sure the video was also featured on Beavis and Butthead at one point. But I just remember hearing that song, and I was like, I just fell in love with that band. And then Basket Case would be the next single, and then that just like, it was over for me. I ended up getting this album on a cassette tape originally, and then I would get it on CD later on. But I was absolutely, like, of all those bands I was listening to at the time, for whatever reason, even more so than Pearl Jam, Green Day just grabbed me and just fascinated me. And I had another friend who in junior high school, Dan, who shared the love. So I think us just feeding off of each other made it just more and more epic. And he was the one who was like, yeah, they have 2 albums before this. And I was like, holy shit. And so he I remember he made me a copy of Kerplunk and a couple of songs from the 39 Smooth album. And then the cassette ran out of space. But I was absolutely obsessed. Like, I could not get enough Green Day, and there were only 3 albums to listen to at the time. But this was the one that propelled them to the heights but made them, a household name. So I just rambled on for a while there. So now you talk.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Pre-internet, where if it's basically not on the radio or MTV, you don't know about it unless you're reading magazines or stuff like that, which, quite frankly, I wasn't enough of a music fan at 11, 12, 13 years old to really be doing that.
We were reading Nintendo Power and WWF magazine at the time.
That's exactly right. And some of us might still be reading those magazines, Chris, but that's neither here nor there.
Nintendo Power went out of circulation several years ago.
But if it was still in circulation, you would still have a subscription. It would be on the floor of your bathroom right now.
Well, yeah, I have other gaming magazines on the floor of my bathroom right now. So.
There you go. I speak the truth. But the reason I say this is because if it wasn't for those outlets, there was really no way to discover a lot of stuff. So it wasn't, I talked about like Tool being a gateway drug when we talked about our Anima episode back in '96. And I actually happened to hear a lot of this stuff on the radio. And that's what was like kind of the gateway before Stradivarius blew my doors off and basically created this podcast 25 years ago without knowing it. But the reason I bring this up is without access to mainstream rock radio in the 90s, I don't think we ever get to where we are today in terms of music fans, right? Because if you think about it, if for some reason all we had been exposed to was like pop and R&B and rap, right? If that's all you knew in 1994, I'm not sure you ever get to this point. So in a sense, you can thank Green Day and Pearl Jam for bridging the gap between, say, Guns N' Roses and like that radio rock of the time and like the rabbit hole we went down with the mixtape in 97 and 98. I mean, I really think that there's something to be said for that.
I remember that you made a mixtape, and it was just called Justin's Best of Alt, and I still have the liner notes from it, and I thought it was interesting because it had Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith on it, and it was kind of like just because those bands they kind of were meshed into the MTV of the time. I mean, same with like Tom Petty. Like, if somebody was good and was making a music video in 1994, that was on MTV. So, like, I remember, the videos for, like, Mary Jane's Last Dance by Tom Petty being played right after Crazy by Aerosmith and then, like, Plush by Stone Temple Pilots and then, What's My Name by Snoop Dogg, So, like, these were all, this is just what was being shown. And like you said, like that was our gateway to what was new at the time. Like you said, this is before the internet, or at least, the internet existed, but none of us had it unless we were Bill Gates, or not Bill Gates, Al Gore.
Al Gore. Well, when you invent it, typically you do have it first. But
yeah, so it was just a totally different world. Like it became so much easier to get. I think the timing was right for us to get into metal in 97, 98, because we had access to a way of discovering more of it. Whereas at this point, we're pretty much at the whim of the radio and TV to tell us what's out there. And this was just wild. Like, and the band just blew up after this. Like this is their first album on a major label. It was on Reprise Records, and the next thing you know, like a few months later, they're playing at Woodstock 94. It's one of the most iconic performances of the entire festival, where it rained and everyone in the crowd just started throwing mud at the band, and the band was throwing mud back. They actually had to cut the show short because everyone was just covered in mud. I remember recording, I think my friend Dan, who I mentioned before, he recorded the VHS, the Woodstock performance, because he had ordered it on pay-per-view, and I borrowed the VHS tape and recorded it to an audio cassette so that I would have the audio version of it. Now I don't know if there's an official release for it, but it's probably been bootlegged a million times. I've had it for years. It's just such a classic, just performance. Just I thought it was just a star-making situation. But they just absolutely blew up. And I don't know about you, I remember having like Green Day fatigue after I listened to this album so many times. I like actually made myself sick of this band within probably a few months. And then Insomniac came out the next year, and I was like right back on the bandwagon.
Well, it's funny because I only got on the bandwagon in '95, and I may not have even told you this story, or maybe if I have. The reason I got really familiar with this band and this album is because in 1995, March 1st, 1995, the Grammy Awards are on TV. And my dad is watching the Grammy Awards, and I was not watching the Grammy Awards this particular year. And he winds up hearing something. I didn't know this until after the fact, but he winds up hearing something on the Grammy Awards, goes out the next day and buys the CD for the band that he had heard on the Grammy Awards. Now, Green Day did not perform at the Grammys that year, but they did, I think, win an award for Best Alternative Performance or something like that. The Green Day wins an award. And so you remember how like when they announce a band or like they announce a winner, they'll play like 30 seconds of a clip or something like that?
Sure.
My dad hears 30 seconds of Green Day, and he's like, holy shit, this is the second coming of the Ramones. He goes out, buys the CD at Tower Records, comes home with it, and starts playing this band over and over again. And I'm like, what is going on here? Because it sounded like some of the stuff that I was listening to at the time. And he winds up buying this album. I'll get to his favorite song in a second, because I don't think you would guess in a million years what his favorite song on this album is. But before I go there...
Not All By Myself, I'm guessing.
No. In fact, in my mind, he's never even heard that track because he turned the CD off after about 3 minutes of the last track. But long and the short of it is, I wind up taking the CD. I'm not even sure that he realizes it's gone 30 years later, but I still have the CD, and I was the one that wound up playing it over and over and over again and got sick of it myself because I just played it so much. But it holds a really interesting place in my heart because I just remember it so well. And quite frankly, I would have never had, I had no money. So if my dad hadn't purchased the CD, I don't think I would have ever had a copy of it until much later in life.
My aunt bought me the cassette tape at the, I assume it was the Wall in 1994 at the Lake Success Shopping Center.
Nice.
And I remember, she said, I just remember telling her, like, I just need to have this tape. I have to. And she's like, oh, I'll buy it for you. I go, you know that there's like bad words on it or whatever. She goes, don't worry about that. that's
That's
what your
great.
aunt is for, is to spoil you. So, and then I remember, I think either the following Christmas, I think my parents ended up getting it for me on CD, because at that point I was pretty much just trying to replace what few cassette tapes I had that weren't mixtapes with the CD counterpart. So I would get, but I think I actually had Insomniac on CD maybe before I actually had Dookie on CD. So I might not have gotten Dookie on CD until the next year or whatever. I just remember asking for it because I didn't have the CD, which was weird to me.
Well, I'll say this. Let me just tell you a quick Insomniac show story, just because I think it. I don't know that I'm ever going to get a chance to tell this story again, so no better time than the present. Obviously, I had played this album to no end, right? And I played it over and over again. And then all of a sudden, Insomniac is due out. And memory serves me correctly. I was walking home from school on a Thursday or a Wednesday. That winds up coming out October 10th of 95. So it must be like, I don't know, a few days prior or something like that. I'm walking home from school, and there's a CD store that I passed on my way home from school. And so my buddy Glenn and I walk into the CD store and we say, "Hey, do you have the new Green Day album?" Not thinking anything of it, because the album was not due out for a couple of days. He's like, "Yeah, we have copies in the back. We're not supposed to sell them yet." And so obviously my friend and I look at each other and we're like, "Oh, well, I guess we'll have to come back." He's like, "Here," gives us the CD. We buy we buy it. Obviously, it was like $16.99, because at the time that was a lot of money. But I had to have the album. They have a copy of it. I buy this album, so I have Insomniac a few days later, and that became my like fascination with getting stuff ahead of time, because it was like it started in 1995 and it's going on to this day where I have to hear it the second it's out, or not out, as the case may be. But yeah, it's just so funny. So that was like my first time I got a CD before it was actually released.
I wonder if, like, in retrospect, you look back and was like, why didn't I ask if they had the Halloween Master of the Rings with the bonus disc?
Yeah, right. Exactly. In retrospect, that had at least been out already. I probably would have gotten that, and I wouldn't have had to have paid up an arm and a leg for it. But yeah, so that's my Insomniac story. But yeah, Green Day, very formative band, and I don't care what anybody says. I know some people are like, "Oh, the vocals not good," or "Oh, the songs are too short." I respectfully disagree. I think that anybody who enjoys rock music can appreciate this for what it is. I don't think anyone's going to say they're the second coming of Dream Theater, okay? But at the same time, they write catchy freaking songs. And I'm not saying that every song is great, and I'm not saying that every album is perfect. And I'm not even saying this is their best album, because it's definitely not. I mean, we can debate about that another day. But if you can't recognize the fun and the nostalgia here on this short 39-minute album, I'm not sure what you're listening to. And if you don't like the band, I'd like to know why. Tell me what it is after having given this a listen that you don't like.
I think that's all very fair. Yeah, I mean, I think it holds up. The production's phenomenal. I don't know. It's timeless to me. I don't think that it sounds dated. And I think that Green Day, I mean, I have to say, like, their last couple albums have not been my favorite, but I mean, pretty much through 21st Century Breakdown, like, I've pretty much loved every album Green Day has come out with. And this one, I mean, this one's probably, besides American Idiot, is probably their most well-known album. I happen to agree with you. It's not my favorite Green Day album. I have a trilogy that is my favorite Green Day albums, and it happens to be Kerplunk, Insomniac, and Warning, which probably are like the three albums that probably get the least amount of attention when the band is putting together a live set list. But I don't know. I always just found those albums to just have such an unbelievable selection of songs, and especially Warning having so many different types of songs. Like they kind of branched out. So those are like my three personal favorites. But this is not far below, and just because of the nostalgia factor of all the crap that we've been yammering on about so far, like it just will always have a very, very special place in my heart. And it's just fast and furious. Like, the album's under 40 minutes long. There's 12 songs and or I'm sorry, 14 songs and a hidden song, which totally have to mention. Like, this was the first album I ever owned that had a hidden track, and this used to blow my mind when I was a kid. And I remember Ralph playing Stone Temple Pilots' Purple album, and they had a hidden track on that, which incidentally also came out in 1994. It was just kind of a thing that bands were doing. Like, there was one on Offspring's Smash album, also came out in 1994. It was just a thing bands were doing, and it made you kind of like, oh man, let me keep listening. There might be more. And even on the cassette copy, if you had to like let that cassette roll for an extra however long, I think maybe like a minute and a half or something, or maybe even less than that. And if you just wait, all of a sudden you're going to get a little bonus song about because there wasn't enough songs about masturbation on this album. Apparently, they had to sneak one more in, and you got to hear Trey Cool, the drummer, do some singing.
It's funny because the album is so short, they didn't need to hide it. They could have just made it another track. It wasn't like they were pressed for space on the disc or anything like that, but it's what they were doing in 94.
I don't think it was meant to be a real serious song.
Yeah, that's also true. That's also true. Again, I'm not sure that we have, I'm not sure that the Kings of Prog Rock would say it's their best track, but I digress. Before we get into it, I think you made a good point. The production on this album is great. And mind you, might be a little bit easier because there's really only 3 instruments. So it's not like you have to deal with a lot of orchestration or anything like that. But even from the prior 2 albums, this was a real step up in production in terms of just songwriting. I think everything is really, really good, although I happen to love Kerplunk myself. And the debut, which is a really raw album, 1039 Slappy Hours. But I guess my question is this. If you had to categorize this album before we start talking about some of the songs, is this an alternative rock album? Is this a punk album? What is this? Because it kind of goes into a couple of different buckets, I think.
It's pop punk, if you ask me. Because you had mentioned the Ramones earlier, bands like the Ramones and the Clash, that was like that original raw kind of punk rock. This definitely has that kind of pop kind of vibe to it, and bands like I think Offspring kind of followed suit with, or actually they really were kind of right neck and neck with each other timeline wise. No Doubt would become a force the year after this, I think, and they're kind of almost like a ska pop punk kind of deal, but I mean, it's punk-y. I don't know that I would call it like raw, hard punk rock the way their first 2 albums were. This definitely has more polish to it. I mean, I've called it alt. I've called it pop punk. I think it falls under both categories. Yeah, I think I have it. I think I have them in my library as punk rock. But that's like our generation of punk rock is this and Rancid and Offspring, like that. That's kind of what we got. I know that probably diehard fans of the Ramones were probably going to be like, well, these guys they're so poppy and it's all radio friendly. And it's like, well, it's just what it was at the time. So,
and they're also filthy rich, right? So they did something right.
Yeah. I remember when Nimrod came out and there was a lot of flack for them writing that song Time of Your Life, which was like a real acoustic ballad. And Billy Joe just did, I think it was on VH1's Behind the Music, just said we just wrote a song that we wanted to do. We did whatever we wanted. What's more punk than just doing whatever you want, and so punk isn't just a genre. It's a mindset. So I mean,
it's a genre that I'm woefully deficient in. I feel like it's really not that far away from metal, true hardcore punk. Late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s punk. It's not that different from thrash, right? It's fast, it's aggressive. I never understood why there was always the 2 different camps, the punk camp and the metal camp, because to me there's a lot of overlap, at least from my limit.
They both have really long hair. It's just one of them's like real tall and the other one's just real long down to your butt.
But they're all wearing leather jackets, right? Like it's all the same thing.
But you know how it is. It's like you join your camp and you stick with it, and it becomes like this matter of pride where friends of mine that obsessed over this album got into metal a couple of years later and then like completely decried like Green Day and Offspring. And that was one thing I never did. Like I always remained loyal to the bands that kind of brought me to the dance, if you will. And I would never like just turn my back on that. Like to me, I never felt like I had to be on one team when it came to music genre. Like I'm team rock and roll. Like give me rock and roll, give it classic rock. I'll listen to the Beatles, I'll listen to the Monkees, I'll listen to Guns N' Roses, I'll listen to Rod Stewart, Green Day, whatever. Like I just like rock music. Megadeth, as we talked about a couple weeks ago. If it makes me happy and I enjoy listening to it, then I'm in. Like and well, I can still go back and listen to this album and it brings the same joy that it brought to me, 20 some odd years ago when it came out.
But that's just it. It's about the contrast, right? Like I can't imagine, and I've said this many times on the podcast, I cannot imagine listening to just black metal or just thrash metal or just prog metal or just power metal. I would go nuts. Like I just can't do it. And maybe I'm just showing my age a little bit, but to me, the contrast or being able to go from Isan to Green Day to Dream Theater to Power Quest. I mean, it's the blend which makes all of these things stand out for the enjoyment that I get out of them, or like it just makes each one stand out more. But I feel like if I just listen to just, I don't know, thrash, after a while, after you listen to Exodus and after you listen to Creator and after you listen to Sodom, after you listen to Destruction, at a certain point, it's like, they're very good guitar players and they write very, very tight, fast songs, but like enough. I need the contrast. And this, I think, provides a nice contrast, which is why I still listen to the band. Not to mention the fact that there's clearly a nostalgia factor here as well.
Absolutely. That all of that was wonderfully put.
Well, thank you. Let's get into the album. It's funny, 14 songs, a bonus track, 39 minutes. I mean, a lot of these songs are coming in at 2 and 3 minutes, so I don't know that we're going to have to dissect each song note by note because we've already talked for about the length of the album, which is kind of interesting, but I'm really curious to hear your songs of the week as like a hardcore fan of this band. But without further ado, Burnout is like this really tight, upbeat opening track, and I think it's really reminiscent of the times. This like song just screams 1994 to me. And I think of all the different aspects to this short little 2-minute song. It's the drumming here, Trey Cool's drumming, which just, I think, drives this song. And just by way of introduction, Billy Joe Armstrong on lead vocals, Mike Dirnt on bass, Trey Cool on drums. I love the drumming on this track. And I think that of all the stuff that you hear, some tracks it's the bass, some tracks it's the vocals, some tracks it's the drums. And this one, it's just the drumming, which is a real standout. Very, very tight.
The person who made me my first metal mixtape, Ralph, at one point, and I promise you he doesn't remember saying this, but at one
he'll
point
deny it, I'm sure.
I remember him saying that Trey Cool is the best drummer in rock and roll.
That's great.
Right around this time, and he was a beast. Like he wasn't the original drummer of the band. He joined the band before Kerplunk was recorded, but I mean, since then it's been this trio. They've actually added. I think 1 or 2 like permanent band members, but this trio has been the core of Green Day since 1992. The thing about Burnout that just I always think about is that like when I got this cassette tape and I brought it home, this was the first song that I didn't know by Green Day,
right?
That I was hearing for the first time because I'd heard Longview and Basket Case. When I Come Around hadn't. But it wasn't a single yet. So this is like my third new Green Day song. And I was like, oh man, here we go. And going back and re-listening to this, I sang along to every word on this album today when I was listening to it. Like just,
I believe it.
Just right in here, just never left my brain.
They're
Like,
seeped into your consciousness at this point.
And I always remember, like, right before they played this song at Woodstock '94, Billy Joel just grabbed the microphone and he was like, "This one's dedicated to all the people in '69. This one's called Burnout." So, and I mean, this song is exactly what it sounds like it would be about. It's about being a burnout.
Which they do better than anyone. They go into Having a Blast, which here, where the drums are standing out on Burnout, here, the bass lines on this one are just fantastic. It's a touch slower than Burnout, but has a very similar feel to it. I also love the layered vocals, which I never really not that I didn't notice, but I never paid attention to because I wasn't dissecting the songs like I was this week. This is the type of song that I would just kill to hear live. Like, just all of a sudden, they play a live set and all of a sudden they just break out Having a Blast. How fun would that be? I feel like they're a little static in their set list, but this is something I'd love to hear.
Oh my God. Without a doubt. I remember, I was trying to make a power hour of just live Green Day songs. And after Knops had made a Pearl Jam one, you realize that, like, Pearl Jam is just one of those bands where they've played every song they've ever recorded live, probably within the last few years. Green Day was like harder. I couldn't find a live version of this song on YouTube anywhere. So yeah, I echo your sentiments. This song is awesome, and it just gets you so pumped up. And I mean, I could actually understand why maybe you wouldn't want to play it in like a live venue, because it's basically a song about like blowing everyone up. So maybe you don't want to, maybe that brings up things are a little too raw to play a song like that. But man, this song has so much energy, and again, like you said, the bass, it opens up with like this ass kicking bass line, and I think the not having that many cooks in the kitchen in this case, there's 3 guys, worked for Rush. Everybody gets to shine. It's the drummer and the bass player and the singer who happens to play guitar. The guitar is almost like the least important, not important, but the least noticeable instrument of those 4 things, because the bass and the drums are such a force. They stand out so much. And obviously the vocals, this was just a great tune. Like, there are no bad songs on this album. As a matter of fact, Burnout's probably one of my least favorites.
Really? Yeah. I would agree with that.
And Having a Blast, I think, is in like a 9-way tie for like second place or whatever. But
it's not your song of the week.
No, it's not.
Okay. Is it Chump, which is the 3rd track?
No. But I love Chump because, again, going back to that Woodstock '94 performance, the way that they actually would play this song into Longview, much like it sounds like on the album, it was cool how they did it live, because they actually would prolong that bass solo that opens up Longview. So this always felt like the intro to Longview in a lot of ways.
I am so happy you said that. I could not agree more, and I've always thought that. But prior to the end of the song, if when I think Green Day, and when I am not talking about the hits, right? Like, we'll get to Basket Case. Everyone knows Basket Case. When I think Green Day, I think Chump. I don't know why, but to me, this is like the quintessential song, and really brings me back to like that, feeling, being 12 years old again. And this is like the perfect soundtrack of like, the pre-teen youth or like the young teen youth. And then that instrumental section is just a real trip.
Yeah. It's as a younger person, like, I don't really think that I was, connecting to some of the like Burnout, like drug use kind of stuff. This song just made me think of just like a loser, just a chump. Their songs didn't really leave a lot to the imagination. Like, it's pretty much lyrically, it is what it is. Yeah, I mean, I know that like a lot of I love that like there's so much of so much of Billy Joe's real life. It goes into the song lyrics. I mean, if you go back to like the first 2 albums, like you listen to this and there's like a lot of the material is like negative shit. Like it's anxiety and it's drug use and it's masturbation, not necessarily negative, that part. But you go back and you look at the lyrics to some of the songs on those first two albums, they're love songs. They're love songs that are like just written as punk rock songs, but these are like love letters to his then girlfriend, now wife, Adrian. Like, and this is during a time he wrote songs for Dookie during a time where him and his girlfriend were kind of on a hiatus. So you can see that there's some tension there. And I think that brought out this really cool, like, angsty side of the band after, like, even though like, audibly, maybe the early stuff sounds angsty, you read the lyrics and it's like, it's a lot of kind of lovey-dovey kind of stuff. And, like, this does not have that. I mean, listen to friggin' Pulling Teeth, which we'll talk about, of course, but, like, this is like another song. And then he goes into Longview, which is pretty much just like, it's a song about just being so bored that all you can do is just sit around and masturbate, because what the hell else are you going to do?
And it's funny to me that this was the first single that came out with the album. It came out as a single the day the album came out. And I always said to myself, it's kind of like an oddball on the album. It sounds different than all the other tracks. But you wouldn't say that it's like a radio-friendly song on its face. And it turns out it is, and they still play it to this day, albeit with muted lyrics because of some of the curses, but like it's just a very, very different kind of song, and it's almost like a slow narrative of a story, albeit the story of a guy that can't get off his own couch, I guess. It's not my favorite song. I like it a lot. I appreciate it, but it's never, even with the iconic chorus and everything else and that unforgettable riff, it's never been my favorite song on the album. There are just other albums or other songs on the album that I prefer. I'm curious to see if it's one of your favorites because it's one of the first that you heard.
It's nostalgically, yes, but it's not one of my favorite songs. I do like that it really is different. I think we've talked about, like, kind of Nirvana being influenced by the Pixies and the kind of like quiet, 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 loud, 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 quiet, 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 loud, loud, loud. And this song is without a doubt that took a page out of that thing, where it's kind of like, even from the beginning, which, by the way, Mike Dirnt wrote that bass line, that iconic bass line, High on Acid, which has become like a real iconic story. But that I think that bass line is like the most iconic thing on this album, I think, like, in all honesty. But it's not my favorite song. I was always more of a Basket Case guy, because, again, if you know anything about my proclivities, I like music that's just balls out exciting from start to finish, and that song was that. But I mean, when I first heard this, like, I was paying attention, but it was Basket Case that really put me over the edge with this
and
band.
I think that was probably that way for most people. But at the same time, the next track, which is a really interesting story here, I remember hearing Welcome to Paradise on Dookie and thinking to myself, this song is just absolutely fantastic. In terms of, like, the best quote unquote song on the album, I think there's a very strong argument for this track. It's also an epic track in the sense that it's, it comes in at 3 minutes and 44 seconds. And by their standards, this may as well be a change of seasons, because this is, twice as long as anything else on the album for the most part. But what I will never forget is that when I quickly went out and got Kerplunk after I stole my dad's copy of Dookie, Welcome to Paradise was on Kerplunk. And I said to myself, wow, I didn't realize that this was a second recording of this song. And I always found that fascinating. But there's just something about this version of it where I would just play it on repeat. And I love the lyrics. And I'm curious which of the two versions is your favorite, because they're very different. I mean, it's the same song structurally, but it's just very different from what you'd hear on Kerplunk.
Yeah, I actually prefer the Dookie version. I think that, first of all, I heard it first. But I mean, I think that, like, Kerplunk is just it's an independently released, much more raw sounding, it almost sounds like a demo album. So I just prefer the polished version. There was like a single release too, where they re-released 409 in Your Coffee Maker, which was one of my favorite songs from the 39 Smooth album. And the just hearing it done in such a like this clarity in this like high production way, it sounded so cool. So I love Kerplunk. Welcome to Paradise is probably one of my least favorite songs on Kerplunk, and it's one of my favorite songs on Dookie.
Wow. Well, I guess there you have it. I just think it's a fantastic song, but it's almost too easy for me to pick as my song of the week, so I'm going to hold off. But I love that song. I think it's whenever I hear it, I am immediately brought back, and it's probably in my top 3 on the album, to be honest.
And again, like another just bass clinic too, especially like when you have that kind of build back up to the final verse and chorus. I mean, it's like the closest thing to like a heavy metal solo on this album, where there's actually some sense of build up rather than like the song just ending in under 2 minutes, which several of the songs on the second half of the album do. Like they're under 2 minutes long, but
it moves.
And it's a great song, I think, to follow up Longview with, because Longview is just such a like up and down kind of song, and this song is just up pretty much all the way through.
Totally. And you mentioned Pulling Teeth earlier. The next track, God, am I happy I didn't piss this chick off. This track is nuts, and like again, it's really dark. And even though it doesn't sound, it's funny. The earlier stuff sounds darker, but has happier lyrics. This album sounds happier, but this is a dark song, man. Like it's crazy. And I'm just, not my favorite song on the album, but I appreciate it for what it is. It's a touch mundane in my opinion compared to some of the other stuff, but man, happy I did not piss off his, now wife. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. This is just a song about, a dude just getting the shit kicked out of him by his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend or whatever you want to call it. I'm sure he deserved it.
I'm sure he did.
This one's also kind of with Burnout as one of my not favorite songs on the album, and I never felt strongly about it. Even going back, I felt like it had the unenviable position of being crammed in between Welcome to Paradise and Basket Case, which are two of the most memorable Green Day songs ever, never mind on this album. So it kind of feels a little bit like filler. I think the guitar solo is pretty cool, but it's kind of corny just because the lyrics are so absurd that it's hard to kind of take it seriously. And
we've covered Manowar, so that should put things in perspective.
Yeah, I mean, this is, minus the loincloth, it's just as ridiculous.
Basket Case. I'm not even going to describe the song because everyone knows it, and I'm convinced this is the song that made them superstars. I'll just tell you a funny story about it. This was about the time in my life where I started going to junior high school dances because I was 13, and I'll just leave it at that. And so what would happen at these dances is that they would play R&B and pop and rap music for basically 3 hours. But about 2/3 of the way through, inevitably, they would do a 15-minute block of like alt rock. And they would play Basket Case, When I Come Around, and then they would play Zero by Smashing Pumpkins, and then Bullet with Butterfly Wings. And then they go right back to the R&B and the rap and, you name it. So I remember like always marking out and waiting for that 15 minutes and then being kind of miserable, even though I was obviously there for other reasons for the rest of the time. But like you knew you were going to get those 4 songs, and they played it every freaking time all throughout 95 and then even into early 96, which was interesting because by that point Insomniac had come out, but they didn't play, Geek Stink Breath, right? They were playing Basket Case, which I always thought was humorous, even at 13 years old.
Yeah. My humorous story about this song was watching the MTV countdown every Friday night and waiting for this to hit number 1. All I wanted in my small little life was for this song to just be number 1 on the countdown. And one day it hit it, and it stayed in first place for 2 weeks and then got unseated by All I Want to Do by Sheryl Crow. And I hated her. I hated her so much for that. But then she got unseated by Interstate Love Song by Stone Temple Pilots, which I think only lasted 1 week, and it got unseated by someone else. But those 2 weeks, I literally jumped up and like was jumping up and down on the couch. Like it was that's just how excited I was over something that was so trivial and inconsequential to 99.999% of the world. But that was what I was like, that's what I lived or died by at that time.
It was
also
a much simpler time.
Yeah. Also, to this day, I think one of the best music videos of all time. It was filmed in an abandoned, what's the nice way of calling it? I was going to say a lunatic asylum, but I don't think that's the politically correct way of saying it. An abandoned mental institution. Let's go with that. But a lot of, if you've ever seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a lot of nods to that classic film. To this day, I think other than Pearl Jam's Jeremy, it's probably my all-time favorite music video just because it brings me back to a time where like, just such a simple time where like all I needed was that music video and it made me the happiest person on earth.
And it got to number one.
Yep. And it's just a song that just, again, like you said before, like uplifting sounding song with like, this is a song about anxiety and panic attacks, which I wouldn't learn about until much later in life. So this song resonates way more with me as a 40-year-old than it ever did as a 13-year-old. But I mean, it's a song where like even though I don't want to hear them play their hits when I see them live, like I want to see a show full of deep cuts. Like this is one of those songs where I'm like, okay, you can play this one because it's just so classic to me. But it's still not my song of the week. I have a feeling we may go with the same song, but we'll see. You talk about songs that they play live, but you don't care, even though they're hits. She was never a single. And it shocks me that this song wasn't selected as a single because it's the best song on the album. It was a single, actually.
Was it?
Yeah, it was a radio-only single. I remember hearing it on the radio. Know that. Yeah, it was. I remember it was the first song I heard from this album after Longview, Basket Case, and When I Come Around, even before Welcome to Paradise.
Interesting.
I remember, yeah.
Well, with good reason. It's my song of the week. And I'll explain why in just a bit.
I mean, that's a really fantastic choice. I want to say my sister is also a big Green Day fan. I think that's one of her all-time favorite songs by the band. This is coming from a diehard Aerosmith fan, by the way. I always felt it as like the natural follow-up to Basket Case. I think that they sometimes would play it live right after Basket Case. For me, it was the first track on side 2 of the cassette tape. So
there you go.
Like Basket Case would end, and then you'd have to flip over to the other side. So she was kind of like this really energetic start to the second side. And I remember talking to my friend Dan, and him, he would always say like, dude, side B is better than side A. And I'd be like, dude, you're crazy. Side A's got like Longview and Chump and Basket Case. And, now that I'm older and have been listening to this album for 28 years, I think Dan's right. So shout out to Dan Jelsic. You were right. Side B might be better.
There's a fatigue factor with A from all these years, but like with this song has something that like is a feature of a lot of the songs that I love that come out today, and that's that like slow build to the epic payoff as the song goes on, and I just love it. The drumming is so tight, and the chorus is just perfect. One of my favorite songs of all time, and quite frankly, I think it's probably been my favorite song on Dookie for a while now, just because it took a while, but this one I really, no pun intended, I really came around on.
Yeah, and they also didn't like pound it into the ground like the other three singles from this album, which I think really got overplayed. And again, that's where the Green Day fatigue factor comes in. But I'm going to follow up with my song of the week is Sassafras Roots. It was just another song on Dookie when I was a kid, and I rediscovered it as an adult a few years back. I was like going back and re-listening to this album, and I was like, this is my favorite song on the album. It's everything that I love about this band. It opens up with just an awesome drum fill, and it's just this like energetic, upbeat sounding song, and it's just about again, it's kind of like Longview without the masturbation. It's just a lot about just sitting around wasting time and being useless, which when you're in 7th grade, I mean, that's pretty much all you're doing. So I absolutely love this song. We're gonna listen to it right now, and being that it's a minute-long clip, you're gonna hear most of the song. So here it is. That's Press Roots.
I'm glad you chose that because I don't think you're alone. This was the song that my dad heard that literally thought he was listening to Joey Ramone again and listening to the second coming of the Ramones.
That's awesome.
And I can see why, because this is really, I mean, you use the word pop punk. That's what this song is. It's punk, but just polished in a way that it's, more radio friendly. Not that this song was on the radio, but I think you're in very good company when it comes to choosing this one.
Yeah, it could have been on the radio. I mean, arguably anything. I think any song from this album would have done fine on the radio.
Yeah, not least of which is When I Come Around, which was another staple to the live set, staple to the radio. In many ways, I think it's probably the best of the radio tunes insofar as made for radio. Right? Like this song is just lends itself to the radio. It's catchy. It's not too heavy, quote unquote. It's not it's not fast. It's just like, kind of akin to the power ballad of Warrant or Winger or one of those bands in the late 80s. This is like their radio friendly song, which was just absolutely perfect. And there's just something brilliant in the simplicity of this one.
I think again, another great music video, and the pacing of the music video is just the band walking. And this is like the perfect walking song. It's just that it has that gait where it's just like, I could just picture walking down the street and listening to this song. It's not going to make you want to run. It's not going to want to make you slow down. You're just going to want to walk at a regular pace. And I think this Green Day is so good at doing like anything. Like they can make a mid-paced song good. They can make a fast-paced song good. They write great ballads. But yeah, this was, I always found this song to be really interesting because it was the first single that I knew before it became a single. Whereas the first two I had heard for the first time on TV and radio, and then it would be like, I wonder what the next single is going to be. And I don't know that I would have guessed that it would have been this one, because I just loved all the songs in their own unique way. I was like, really, it was really fascinating to me that, they chose this one. And believe it or not, MTV, before they started airing the music video, actually showed the Woodstock 94 performance of this first, which they came out Woodstock. They came out with a 2-disc compilation, which I mentioned in our Metallica Ride the Lightning episode. And so this was one of the featured songs on that. And so they made a little music video with, all the footage from the giant mud fight at Woodstock, which, by the way, Mike Dirnt was confused for one of the security guards thought he was a fan because he was so covered in mud. He thought he was a fan on stage, and he tackled him into a speaker and like injured him and like knocked out 2 of his teeth. And he's like, bro, I'm in the band. But like, they were so covered in mud, nobody could even tell who the hell was who. It was like absolute chaos. I think another iconic Green Day song. Another one that is in the conversation for one of my favorites is Coming Clean, which I, in recent times, was listening to the lyrics and I'm like, oh my God, this is a song about coming out. In 1994, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And I came to find out that Billy Joel wrote that song because he's bisexual, and this was kind of like his way of writing a song about it. He said that he's never actually been with another man, but he is bisexual, and this song was about coming clean with his bisexuality at 16 or 17 years old. That's some deep stuff for back then. And I just think between the content of the song and just the song itself, it's one of my favorite songs on the album. It's super, super fast. It's like a minute and a half long, just like quick in and out, awesome song. And I love that it had, that was his way of dealing with something that he was struggling with. And I think that's really cool.
I never knew that. That's fascinating to me. And it's the first of a string of 3 really, really short songs, well under 2 minutes. Coming Clean, Eminence Sleepus, the one Mike Dirnt track on the album, if you give him the credit on that one. And then In the End, Eminence Sleepus is kind of, I think, the most forgotten track on the album. And it's another one of those songs that I would just love to hear live. Just throw it on a random set list. It's only going to take 2 minutes, and that includes the guitar change. Just play it. It's kind of reminds me of a more polished version of something you would have heard on those first 2 albums. Part of me thinks it might have been the first song written for this album because it's very much in the style of a Kerplunk song or a Slappy Hours song.
This is another one of my favorites on the album. And again, probably speaking to why my friend Dan thought side B was better than side A. I don't think there's any duds on it. There's a couple of like okay songs on side A. I don't feel like there's any just okay songs on side B. Like they're all really good. And like there's just this string of, after When I Come Around, of just these fast and furious songs, Coming Clean, Eminence Sleepus, and then In the End, which is another under 2 minute song. But oh my God, I absolutely love this song. Again, you said Mike Dirnt. It's the one song that he's supposedly credited with writing, and it shows because the bass guitar is kind of a featured instrument in this song. In the End is another one I really like. Just kind of starts out right away. Again, it's another one of those get in and get out type of tunes. The chorus is just super catchy. The hooks for this band are all in the lyric lines. Like it's not about like guitar solos or anything like that. No. Like it's mostly drum fills, bass lines and vocal lines that are the hooks, and there's hooks galore on this album. How do you feel about this one?
I'll say this about In the End. if you're a metalhead and you've never heard this band, this would be the one song I would recommend the metalhead hear because it's just so fast and furious. My one gripe is that it's very cymbal heavy in spots, so I feel like he's just constantly hitting the cymbal, which is a little annoying over and over.
Would you say it's symbolic?
Yes, you could say that, but I'll go one better. There's a bass solo here that was obviously Marcus Grosskopf inspired. I mean, I think that's obvious, but kidding aside, when you have music with bass solos, not many bands do it. So when you hear it, shout out to Marcus and Halloween because it might as well be Eagle Fly Free Part 2. But no, very, very good song. And then it goes into the final track before the bonus track, which we've talked about, and that's FOD, or otherwise known as Fuck Off and Die. This is, I always thought, like kind of a peculiar way to end the album. But yet it wouldn't fit anywhere else, right? So like it has to be the last track. And it starts off with these vocals and then what sounds like a ukulele. And then all of a sudden it like kind of picks up. And this is the kind of track you're going to think I'm nuts. It reminds me of something that Devin Townsend would do now, where it's just like really peculiar and out there. And then all of a sudden, bam, it just hits you over the head. So I feel like Green Day was channeling their inner strapping young lad or Devin Townsend, and that's FOD.
It's kind
never thought you never thought I would compare Green Day to Devin Townsend, but there you go.
No, that was not on my bingo card. It's kind of like the way that Longview is soft, heavy, soft, heavy, soft, heavy. This is just half soft, half heavy over. Right. And it lulls you into like this kind of false sense of security. Like it's just a little man with his little guitar. And then you just hear that electric guitar kick in. And like, I was going to say, if you wanted to play a song from this album for a metalhead, play in this song, because that part in the middle where it just starts to, this is the heaviest part of the whole album, I think, is the second half of this song. And then the album ends, or does it?
Or does it? And what can you say about the bonus track other than, I mean, what can you say other than get past me? Whatever. I'll just say it's fitting. I think it's a nice end for how this album kind of goes off. And again, when you're 12 or 13, I guess it's kind of fitting.
This has to go down as the episode where we referenced masturbation the most, maybe other than the Yngwie episode.
For different reasons.
Yeah, that's a different type. I thought it was interesting. Green Day did another live show that ended up being broadcast on MTV called Jaded in Chicago. I believe it came out before Insomniac, so it was all Dookie. It
did. I think it was in 94 or 95.
And I was like, couldn't believe that Trey would come out and play this song by himself, and then he would go into Dominated Love Slave, which is the other song that he sings on Kerplunk, which is, again, another absolutely out there, probably not too far off from those, was the song we talked about, Pulling Teeth, from before, which is just about, like, just physical relationship abuse, but like in that you were asking for it, or whereas like Pulling Teeth is where you're not exactly wanting it, and Dominated Love Slave is like, yeah, bring it on. There's a lyric, put a belt sander against my skin. That's all you need to know. But it's interesting, like how Trey was kind of showing off his personality, in the early days of the band. And all three members of the band have such just magnetic personalities. They're such a blast to see live. It's just really a lot of fun. But this has been an absolute pleasure. I don't even know how long we've been talking. It's got to be pretty long at this point. But man, I could go on and on about this album. The album was originally supposed to be called Liquid Dookie, which was which was literally named after the band getting diarrhea from eating bad food while touring. I guess in so many words, this was deemed too gross, so they settled on the name Dookie. And I do want to mention the album art is one of the most iconic album arts I've ever seen. I don't know how I never bought one of those full-size posters, because there's so much going on in this just animated like wacky world with a monkey throwing poop and dogs and stuff. It's just such a cool album cover, and I think that probably was another part of the band's appeal at that time. Super cool. It was Richie Boucher, I believe, was he was the one who did the artwork. So just super cool. Like everything about this album is just so it's just so nostalgically pleasing to me. Like I just looking at the cover art just makes me happy. So yeah,
knowing
this was a blast.
No, I'm having a blast. Knowing that it's not your favorite Green Day album, I'm curious. Scale of 1 to 10, what are you giving this?
This is a 9.5 for me. So that just goes to show you that the albums I like even more are very close, if not a 10. That's just how much I like this band. But this album, I mean, it's pretty much as perfect as you're gonna do in this tiny little span of time with a cute little bow on it. It's just so much. There's so much content in such a short period of time, and it doesn't leave you wanting more. It's like just enough. 14 songs in a short amount of time. It's just really. I think it's just perfect for, not perfect, because if it was perfect I would have given it a 10, but it's pretty close to perfect as it gets, at least for me.
And I think that one of the nice things is because it's an easy listen. Sometimes it doesn't feel like you're waiting for the next track to end. It's just an easy listen. You're in, you're out, and you're on to the next thing. It's a 9.0 for me. There's obviously a nostalgia factor here. There's no question about it. But I will not be checking my metal card at the door. I will be carrying it as I listen to Dookie proudly, because the album kicks ass. So I'll leave it at that. It's been a pleasure. I'm glad we got to talk about this. We are not going to do news today. We were recording this a little bit in advance, so we want to make things timely. And it won't be timely if we talk about the news. So skipping that, we will go to what we are talking about next week. It's the first Monday of September. It means it's Request Monday, and we're going back to a band that we have covered in the past, but we've never done one of their studio albums, and that is Royal Hunt, which means which Royal Hunt album? Arguably their best, certainly the first one that I fell in love with, and that is Paradox by Request. I am very eager to do this album because it just is so awesome.
I'm not sure how many people would argue against this being recognized as their best album.
If you do, I'd love to hear from you, because they have a lot of great albums, but this is beyond.
And I love Moving Target, the album that came out before this. Those two albums with DC before he was fired and was brought back many years later. But yeah, this is another one of those albums that was so important. And again, Ralph getting another name drop. He bought me the CD. I think it was a birthday gift at some point. I remember listening to it just the very first time and just being like, damn. So I believe this was...
Nothing sounds like it.
What, I'm sorry?
Nothing sounds like it. It's
I know.
One of a kind.
Yeah.
And that's... but we'll get into that.
Yeah, I believe Knops was the one who requested this, so this one's going out to Knops. I'm looking forward to talking about this, but I may spend the rest of the week listening to Green Day at this point. Like I got the bug again, so I might just I think I'm gonna have to listen to the old stuff, those first two albums, and
well, the good news is it'll take you about 30 minutes because they're very short. And throwing in Insomniac, and you're at 37 minutes.
I might not be able to stop. I just might have to just
go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Well, enjoy. It's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you taking the journey again with me. We'll come back next week with Royal Hunt and DC Cooper, and we'll catch you next week. Enjoy, bud. I'll talk to you soon.
Dude, take care. I am so excited to see some of the comments about this one.
Bring it on.
Yeah, it's just so fun to kind of go outside the box a little bit. But you know what ends up happening is that we get people reaching out and being like, I can't believe you did an episode on the Monkees, and Pearl Jam being one of our most listened to episodes. So, I mean, I think it's good to, like you said earlier, got to branch out. But, I'm just loving all of the interaction in the Facebook group, so I'm really looking forward to hearing some thoughts on this one. So yeah,
a lot of opinions, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, thanks for picking this. This has been a real treat. So yeah, take care, my friend.
Take it easy, bud.
And I was just right there.